Hi, everybody. My name is Quincy Daniels, and I'm one of the faculty here at NCU. And I thought I'd have a little time to kind of share and talk about something that's pretty important to me, which is my daughter. And we're going to talk about some of the things about a day in the life of Fiona Daniels. Some of the most interesting things that I've seen over the last 3 years is how working away from what expectations are for children with special needs, how it can actually function. So we'll kind of move on a little bit. So if you move to the next slide. Some of the interesting things that I wanted to talk about is I'll give you a little history for Down syndrome and things like that. And then they'll talk about some of the health challenges and some of the key points about, they give you this congratulations. You have a daughter with Down syndrome. They try to put a spin to where it's positive and things like that. And I'll take you through a couple of things that with Fiona and how she's managed to overcome a few things. We call it the continual fight because we're always on the lookout for, is she being treated right? Are they welcoming? Is inclusion a real thing? And then we'll talk about her decision, because it is her decision. She wanted to get on stage and be a part of it. So those are things that as we move forward, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more. My particular background, I was a special education assistant, and then I was a special education teacher, and then I was a K-12 principal for a school for the blind. So I've basically had a few years regarding working with kids with disabilities. And I just said, well, there was the decision to go for it. So we decided to do that. So next slide, please. All right, so everybody goes Down syndrome or trisomy 21. Well, a little history is that John Langdon Hayden Down was the first person who actually described this, you know, the characteristics and behavioral things that would be associated with Down syndrome. So I had read about it early in, and I've worked with some people who had Down syndrome, but I never thought it was going to affect me personally. But that part is coming. Next slide, please. All right, so as it progressed over, in 1958, Jerome Lejeune and his team, they figured out, oh, well, there's 47. And there's a couple of things within chromosomal makeups. And that, you know, if you have the extra, and we won't go into all the biology of it, that can cause Down syndrome. So if you start looking at it, I always say, oh, don't worry, Fiona, you have an extra gift. You know, you start doing things that you want to go ahead and show people that it's their challenges, but we can do things to overcome them or make accommodations for them. So I think we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation now. All right, if you could, next slide. All right, so here's the one thing about the entire spectrum of how we work with children with Down syndrome or people with Down syndrome, is that there isn't a one particular group that we can actually say yes or no, this is going to be real specific here. A lot of the information that's provided, we pretty much had to learn on our own. Because one of the interesting points about, we used to say, after 5 years, you're supposed to be an expert in the field. Well, after Fiona was born, we had an interesting comment of, okay, how are we going to navigate this? And my background was special education, and my wife's background was education, but she said, well, I'm going to get my doctorate in special education because we're going to be in this for the long haul. We're going to be in this for the fight. So that's one of the things that ends up happening, how we were going to navigate working with our daughter. So that was just one of the things that we were going to do. All right, so next slide. We had to account early for health because she spent about 2 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit, and that was part of the things that we had to learn how to first not freak out and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's like, because they said, well, it may be a possibility of having a hole in the heart, but we're going to check in a few days and see if it closes on its own. Luckily, it closed on its own. And we were just worrying about, okay, let's get her healthy, because she was a preemie. And she was about, I'd say 6.5 pounds. And that was like 2 months early. So she would have been a very, very big girl in terms of most of our children. And I have a lot of children, 11. Yes, we have 11. And we've managed to get through that part. Next slide, please. All right, things that are pretty common in children with Down syndrome. Cataracts, glaucoma, nearsighted. Well, nearsightedness, yes, that kind of works with my daughter. Hearing loss, we didn't have to worry about, but we always were worrying about the things of the milestones that children make during their life, you know, the first couple of years. Well, first, she didn't walk until she was 2. And then we were like, I remember the social worker coming over, and the first thing that ended up happening is that they went through and they said, oh, geez, we are so sorry. The milestones aren't being made yet, but we have a walker for you. And she took to the walker and started going, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have to strengthen her legs. We don't know what to do yet, but we're gonna learn about it. So we, and jumping ahead a little bit, we put her in Irish dance for like 7 years. Just the constant movement up and down and moving. Little did we know it would pay off later, but it's really one of the things that we noticed, that as she got stronger, she didn't use the walker. And it is just a difficult challenge working with other people who don't have what we call skin in the game. Because it's like, oh, they can't do this. Oh, they can't do that. Oh, and I remember, and I said, to this day, I will continually broadcast this as much as I can. At the ripe old age of 1, and we're trying, everybody's insured in our family. And I remember a prominent insurance company, not going to say their name, but they said, well, we don't insure those people. And I was like, did you just tell me you don't insure people with disabilities? He's like, well, you know, we kind of figure they only live to about maybe 40, and that would probably be something that we really don't want to do. To this day, it's like, I still, every time I go by and you're driving by, I kind of get a little worked up about that, because the fight is always there. The expectations are, or lower expectations are always there. Anyway, next slide, please. She has actually, when she was born, she had a hypothyroidism, and when it was producing too much. And then we balanced that out. And then she was back to lower thyroid function. So we balanced that out on thyroxine. So she takes that daily. Didn't have a wheat allergy, got lucky with that. Immune auto leukemia, that does happen, but we always track everything. A lot of the things that you just take for granted, like just anybody with a cold, it's like she continually always had a low immune system. So she was always runny nose or coughing or sneezing or something that we're just going, hope she gets stronger. But then we had a plan. All right, next slide. So here we go. February 23rd, 2004. So this is the class. We live out in the middle of the woods, nowhere. We're 25 miles from a city. And of course, right about 11:20-ish, it's like, okay, it's time. And I'm going, of course it's going to be icy, snow, wind, and everything out here in wonderful, cold Wisconsin. And I'm like, okay. She's like, no, I think I need to push. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. So I'm like, oh my gosh, can we go? So I'm doing flashing lights, going about 70, get pulled into the ER, and we're running through the door, literally. And we're like, okay, well, all right, you've managed to make it from Mindoro, Wisconsin to La Crosse, Wisconsin, so many miles away in about, half an hour. So it can be done, but I recommend you not drive that fast. So 15 minutes in, it's like, okay, we're going to go ahead and put her on the table, see what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be fine. And the doctor was very new. Very new. Matter of fact, he's like, well, we don't think that. And she's like, this is not my first rodeo. That was her exact comment. So therefore, we're going to have this baby now. The nurse was getting ready because she's like, yep. So we delivered the baby, but then we noticed there wasn't something that was a little odd. So they were running the full spectrum. And then it's like, okay, congratulations, you have a daughter with Down syndrome. I'm like, okay. But you see, my big thing was breathing, 10 fingers, 10 toes, things like that. Because I'm like, all right, I've worked with children with disabilities for years. Oh my gosh, the emotionalism that came with it. So they had the geneticist, really poor bedside manner. Within 5 minutes, I'm not kidding, 5 minutes, we're like barely holding the child. First thing that happens is that comes in, it's like, okay, well, your daughter has Down syndrome and she's going to be mentally deficient, probably pass away at 40. Maybe you have to live institutionalized for the rest of her life, blah, blah, blah. And by that time, I was pretty hot. I'm like, you don't tell my wife that, and you need to take your comments and go that way. Otherwise, I was going to help him out that door. But that was the first 5 minutes. So it was just this thing that we said, not my daughter. The challenges of going through is just, you have to say higher expectations and we're going to work. Because I was just going to say institutionalized, not my daughter, not going to happen. The things that end up happening with people for lack of compassion and some places is lacking, and we were working on it. All right, next slide, please. So we learned a lot about developmental delays. We learned and ate up as much of these things that we could find about what she's going to do. How are the milestones going to go? What's the IRB going to do? Things like that. IRBs, I just kind of did the thing where we're going to go and research this. We wanted to talk to people at the university. We wanted to talk everywhere. And we wanted to find out, what can we do? Well, one of the things that we ended up doing is that as I knew about IEPs and how we're going to implement it and how we're going to quantify it and how we're going to go and say, we'd like to see this goal done by here. Well, that went out the window after about the first 5 years, because the milestones that she was making was on her terms, not our terms. So we would go through and say, okay, we'd like to see that she would know her ABCs, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yep. And she did, but it wasn't at our schedule. It was at her schedule. So we had to learn that. And it was kind of a hard thing to do. So being patient was, we had to learn a lot of patience. So that's part of the things that we had to focus on. So within the developmental delays, we found that, okay, speech became very important. We had a couple of things that I was actually good at because I was a physical education major when I was undergrad. I'm like, I told her, okay, here's the deal. I'll take care of the physical part. You work on the language skills and all this other stuff. And she's like, okay, we have a plan. So that's the part where we said we're going to put her in Irish dance to strengthen her legs and all this other good stuff. So 7 years of Irish dance, legs were strong. She was happy getting on stage. And we still ran into certain things about prejudice and discrimination. As a 5.5-year-old was getting ready to do 6, and we started in one particular area, and they said, oh, because the delays for development and movement and things like that was always a half tick or a half second too slow. The first dance academy we went to said, oh, well, we're going to go and have a, how would I put it? We were going to go and have a presentation where all the little dancers were going to be on stage and da da da. And they said, oh, well, we got that canceled. Well, I said, well, if it's canceled, that's fine. But we were going to the fair anyway. Went to the fair, out trotted her group of kids, minus our daughter. Wasn't really happy about that. So when we addressed it, they just said, well, we felt that the steps and that she would not understand, and therefore we didn't want to embarrass her, blah, blah, blah. And I said, this is only the beginning. And yes, my daughter will actually be fine and she will do well. But it still always was one of those things that expectations are important. Because she was like, oh, I need to go up there. And we're like, no, they missed a point and they didn't bring your outfit. But we're very protective of her even today. All right, next slide, please. So right about 15, we noticed metabolic changes started to happen. You know, puberty starts setting in, whatever. Thyroxine level or thyroid, you know, from it just was up and down, up and down. We couldn't never settle it. So in 1 year, we had some gains, and I'm like, okay, aside from just generally, she was fairly happy with herself to begin with. We were fairly happy with her, but it wasn't going to be healthy. So we wanted to do something, and that's when she decided at some bodybuilding show, because we were always going to different places and seeing different things. And it's like, she decided, ooh, wow, that looks interesting up there. It's something I can do, Dad. Next slide, please. So right about this bodybuilding show, there was this guy, he's like doing the it thing for his portion of the show. And I was like, let me get something to drink. I came back and she's like having a pose down with this guy over there. I'm like, okay, I think we have something that we're going to build on, because she doesn't mind being in front of people and doing her thing. So, but we still had to work on it. So this part here, when we said, had to develop a plan. And so I'm like, okay, I know I can handle some of it, but I don't know how to. I had never been to the organizational part of how you get somebody on stage competing. What are the rules? All these other things that I could not, I couldn't navigate. So we found an online trainer. And the online trainer, she was really a great person and very supportive. And this was one of the things that we did find out, is that the training had to be very specific. The training meant that we have to build her up slowly and then move into something better. And as she got better, it started to show. And the next thing after that, we said, well, we've got to have some supporters. Because even in the process, and that's always what it's always about, it's always about the process. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be longer than you think, but the outcomes are going to be great as long as you're consistent. So we found a bodybuilding organization that wanted inclusion, because the first 2 or 3, they're like, your daughter has Down syndrome? Oh, no. No, we can't do that. So we went through and we had some comments from other people about, well, I would go over and do the natural bodybuilding shows that are located in the Midwest and some other places. And I checked into this one particular person. His name is Leif Anderson, Natty Revolution. And he's like, really? Your daughter wants to be on our stage? You bring her on over. Because if you search enough, you will find what you're looking for. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in. And so then it's like, okay, now we have a date. We have organizations. We have, I can put something on the calendar, and that's always very good with Fiona. You put it on the calendar because she's very concrete, and say, you have this many months to get to this goal here. So we started out 158. And then we went to about, I would say, 130-ish in the first 6 weeks. And from there on, it was a lot of cardio, a lot of working out, a lot of eating right. And literally, it just started to come off. It started to come off in a way that, because I'm kind of, okay, well, we'll see what happens. But she started to develop a couple of things that I really noticed, is that one, she was finding out Her background had a lot to do with, I call it her grandfather. Her grandfather was an Olympic boxer in 1960, won a bronze medal in boxing. So I always tell her, don't worry, Fiona, you've got Olympic blood in you. And so you're going to be fine. So after that, next slide, her first show, she was ready to go. We'll go through that one again. Next slide. So here's what it consists of, and it's still to this day, because that was like 2 years ago. 5:30 a.m. Peloton, because you have to do the cardio. You just have to. The one thing that we understood is that you have to get the blood moving. You have to get certain things in there, build out and take care of the lactic acid. We won't go through all of it. Then she had her school. Then we're going to meal prep. First year, I kind of did the meal prep. And after that, she starts doing the meal prep. Because if you do things consistently in a certain way, on a certain time, on a certain day, for people who are very concrete, it's very easy to get there and do well. And then 5:30, 7:30 is the second workout. So she got a lot of working out. And all that did was take her from 158 to 95 pounds for her first competition 6 months later. So next slide, please. So when we start looking at it, we were like, oh, now, if her stage presentation was going to do well, that's where we'd go, all right, we're doing well. But she had to get through the idea of how we were going to practice with angel wings, bikini. Let's see, there's different areas that she wanted to focus on because she liked that. And when we started looking at the other people asking, well, can we do better? Can we find out how we can like grow muscle? And the first thing I remember one of the US champions telling me is like, first, she's going to win on symmetry because she's not going to be one of the monsters that have all the major muscles, but her stage presentation is really good. And the stage presentation was really good because she had 7 years of Irish dance. She was used to being on the spotlight. We just had to give her the accommodations so she could be successful. And if you, it's like they'll have these numbers like you can see on her waist. Her short-term memory is about yay big. So she couldn't remember certain things about numbers and they would always move people around the stage. So we just said, well, if you just call her by her name, she will still move to where you need her on stage. So instead of 45, exchange places with number 78 and nobody's moving. And I said, why don't you just use her name? And after that, they kind of said, oh, okay. So they just said, Fiona, why don't you move over with number 178? Then they were moving and they were fine. Next slide, please. So she got her first win and we were pretty happy about it. And it's just one of the things about when you're used to being on stage, you just got to gain more confidence. And the more, oh, can you go back, please? The more that she had the opportunity to be on stage, the confidence just kept building. It's always interesting with my daughter. The first thing that tends to happen is the first time out on stage, she's kind of okay. By the third time she is out on the same stage, the personality comes out. She starts to do things. She's interacting with the audience. And she definitely understands that, yep, it's good to be able to win. But her big thing is she's getting a lot of support from the adults that she doesn't get around this particular area over here. And I will emphasize that a couple of times. Next slide. So second show, much better. She's a lot more confident. She was definitely knew the routine, started getting through and did fairly well again. And what ends up happening is that she kept understanding it's like, I want to be like them. And in inclusion, she started building a following about, I want to be like them. And I said, all that takes is two things, time and effort. And she definitely puts in a lot of work 6 days a week. sometimes 7, twice a day, to be able to compete, because we're trying to beat the genetics. When we start looking at a lot of things, when they say, well, there will always, I think it was one of the things that I remember my wife telling me, she didn't, well, if you have Down syndrome and things like this is going to be, it's going to be difficult. And they're going to always, when you say Down syndrome, there's a look at where people decide what you're going to look like. Your tongue's going to kind of be out. You're going to be a little more overweight. You're not going to be active. You're not going to be able to process as fast. And I said, well, we don't have to do that. We're going to change that. And first, when people started understanding, it's like, she's getting there, just have to give her more time. And the organization we're with is really helpful about getting her and giving her more time. And we're pretty successful so far. We can always do better, because the first show that comes up this season is May 7th. So yes, she has been putting in a lot of hours, and we track all of her meals and everything like that. So next slide. All right, so we had this one where we're like, okay, we had the wings. This is the angel competition. And she was like, Dad, everybody's got big wings. I'm like, uh-oh. And I'm like, she's like, I know I'm small, but I need some big wings. I'm like, okay, all right, we're gonna do that. Because when you're on stage and you're competing, you gotta navigate where you are in space and all that. And she does that fairly well. It's just that she was definitely, she's like, the wings I'm having right now, that's fine, but I need the better ones. I'm like, you got it. So it's always interesting, especially from where we've been sitting, watching all the things that are going overseas, that's happening, that's not so great. But the last 2 competitions, her wings are huge. They came in from Ukraine. Actually, they do great work. And that's just part of the things I'm connecting on how the world is so small. So there's always a connection somewhere if you look for it. Next slide. So when we got around to the 4th show, and she had her wings and her outfit and things like that, and literally we were not expecting a win or much less a pro card. And I'm like, did that really happen? It's like, literally, it's like tearing out, crying and all this, because nobody had done that before. People with Down syndrome do not get the opportunity to compete at a professional level, to go make a career out of it. Because they go, well, what do you make for these particular wins? Oh, some go $3,500 for a first place. Some go $12,000 for a first place when you are a professional. But the only way you can do that, you got to win something at their event. So she did fairly well with her competition, and we were pretty happy with it. It was just definitely out of the blue. We did not expect it. And I remember the US bodybuilding champion that became her best friend, Alana Kuhlman. And it was the first time. It was the first time that anybody came up and gave her a hug that said, good job. Those are the things that count. Because all through high school, she has moved away from being the person in high school, because I like prom is Friday or Saturday. And what ends up happening, she's never been asked out. No, she hasn't had one party. She hasn't, because it's not the look, because the look is good. We work hard on that. The fact that they see the disability first is the problem. If you're making assessments of people and their abilities because of the disability, I just said, you don't know my daughter yet. So those are the things that really kind of made me a little unhappy about where we are. But what ends up happening is that I see where she's going, and she gets all the support that she needs to be competitive, as long as we do the work 3 hours a day, but that's beside the point. But people tend to actually shy away from people who have a disability. And to have never had a date, to have never had any physical touch as a hug in a school, we can do better than that. Anyway, next slide. So we see the progression. So the first year she was like 95 pounds. And of course, me being very new to this, I'm like, I think we need to put more like tanning oil on her because it just didn't work right. And then the next year we were doing a little bit better and she had gained about 8-9 pounds of muscle. So as we said, May 7th is coming and she is definitely into the 2-a-days right now. And when she's moving and working out, the first thing that happens is like, all right, we have to do the cardio first. Then you take a break for like 3-4 hours. Then you have to come through and we do the cardio again. And then we hit the weights and everything is measured. She gets, and for whatever purposes, a lot of people, oh, well, you're starving and all this. Like, no, she eats 5 meals a day, sometimes 6. And that's the big thing about metabolism. If you slow down and say, okay, we're going to only go, say, 900 calories, that slows your metabolism down and you don't burn the fat and you definitely don't build any muscle. And with the way my daughter particularly, the way we try to balance out, her legs keep growing. So we put in a lot of things to try to keep the balance right and it's coming along. So we figure that when you would see the 2022 version, you're going to see a lot stronger of a person on stage, a lot more confident, because right now her stage presence is coming along really well. Oh, I think I see a question. Let me see here. Okay.
Looks like someone started a question. Catherine, did you have a question?
Oh, okay.
We'll keep an eye out.
All right, we definitely will. But that's part of the things that I really did believe is that when you give people, and especially from my background with the military, you have a certain regiment that you follow just like that every day. And what people with Down syndrome, or at least with my daughter, is that she knows her schedule, she knows what she's going to eat, she knows how long the workouts are, and she knows that when she goes to compete, she's going there with the people that support her. Those are the things, because she hasn't seen too much of it in the community. And that's part of the process. It's like we're really looking for a national sponsor because I have looked, I have checked, and there is just not a teen in the United States that has earned a pro card in bodybuilding who has Down syndrome, ever. But it's one of those that either someone's going to pick up nationally, and that's what our big goal is, because this is going to be her career. When we have the social workers that come in, they're like, oh, well, you know, we want to put her in a, you know, what is it? Supported employment. I said, wow, that's great if she wasn't going to have a career already. They're like, well, we don't know. I'm like, let me see. We can do it this way, or you can go find another client. It's just one of those things that, like, I worked really hard to give my daughter the confidence that she needs. And once she gets on stage, those are the things that matter. Those are the things where she says, they see me and I get to be a part of them. And when my daughter starts to say things like that, I know it's worth it. And that's why literally I can see that for the next 20 years, especially if she's progressing each year, we're making gains, she will be fine. Next slide.
We do have a question and a comment.
Yes. Okay.
From Mary Beth, Dr. Daniels, how does Fiona track her workout and calories?
Oh, that's we have that with our online trainer. We have a little app on our phone, and what the app does, it says, here's your workout for the day. and usually it's 6 days a week, but starts with cardio, and then it has a program, and we log in how long she's been doing, what's the weights and things like that on the phone, which goes to her trainer. We do like every couple of weeks, we do a weigh-in, and we do the body fat analysis and all that as she gets closer to the show. So anything with meal prep, it's like sometimes we go with measurements, and it's like it's all measured out, and then you put it in the refrigerator, and the next thing you know, it's like, all right, here's your meal for its part. Let's see, and literally it's like, I like the way it is with her 5 meals, but she can always have as much vegetables as she wants. So she'll just sit there and eat a lot of the vegetables and say, when's the next workout? And I know, it's like, yep. So we did a lot of Peloton during the pandemic. We're just Peloton. Didn't want to go anywhere. And one of the interesting points about our home is like, somewhere you're going to catch this. So right around January, the entire household caught it. It lasted like 3-4 days. And I was like, oh my gosh, what about kids with Down syndrome? And the worry and everything. And she was very asymptomatic. She had a cough.
Of course.
And I'm going, because I'm like, the stats were not really nice about kids with Down syndrome that caught COVID. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's like, where do we get it? I don't, and we're just, how are, and she's like, fine. When she does the fine, that means you're giving her too much attention. It's like, here, drink this. And guys, literally at about 5 a.m, we're getting her ready for the bike. So it's like, take your thyroxine, here's your water. We kind of transitioned a little bit to coffee now that she understands the benefits of coffee. So we keep her going fairly well. It's just, I really, really think that she's going to shock even more people on May 7th. We really do, because she is coming along.
Awesome.
Okay.
And this is a comment from Ivy. I live in Spain and I stayed up to see this. My grandson has Down syndrome. He is 5.5, the greatest joy of my life. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you. It's just one of the things that when people tell you they can't, just say, with accommodations, they can do most everything if you're consistent.
And we do have another question. So
Yeah.
Are any of your other children into bodybuilding? Curious how this disciplined routine impacts and positively shapes the household.
My son, who graduates from Iowa State, for some reason, he tries to be like his grandfather, and he took up boxing. I'm just going, and he became a Marine. I was just going, oh boy. So there's been a lot of people. It's like, long time ago, I had to run marathons with my wife because she was a marathon runner. Only good thing about running is stopping. Sorry, that's just my opinion. So we're always either doing something physical, going out hiking, so she's had a lifetime of being active. I mean, back when we were doing Insanity, she'd jump in and do the Insanity workout, and I'm like sore and I'm falling on the floor, and she's like, let's go. I'm like, yeah, it's easy for you. You're 80 pounds. But she's always had that joy of, I need to move. And if you're moving, that's a good thing, because we have a whole case of sedentary, and that will kill you. The sedentary lifestyle does not work for anyone, just my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I think we could all learn from that. And then we have a question from Lisa. Could you please give me some potty training tips? I have a 5-year-old grandson with Down syndrome.
It was very interesting, the entire process for her. It's like, okay. And that's where we go with, here's mom. Mom's going to go and show you, and mom's going to go and show you, and mom's going to go and show you. And then she has like other sisters that were like, and they were going to go show you. And it's a process. Remember, it's on their scale, not our scale. And if you're patient enough, it comes around. But we're saying, okay, well, you should be able to do this by this time. It's like, once it kicks in, it kicks in. But we had to be patient enough for that. So it's like always the growth in progress. That's why our particular motto for that, growth in progress. Be patient, it will happen. just like walking.
Then I think we have one final question. Are we able to watch the show virtually on May 7th?
They haven't sent me the link, but they usually put out a live web link for people to watch, and they like to build their program, so it's usually free. But there were things like we have our own Instagram page, so if you were interested, it's like I can put that. It's like hashtag Team Fiona Persephone, because her middle name's Persephone, and it pulls up every workout every day that we have done this since 2020. The whole point of that was that you'll see people like, oh, well, so it must have been some strange diet. Oh, it must have been this, it must have been that. And it's like, no, this is how we do it. We can't do the, oh, low carb thing. It doesn't work, because she started to faint. And I didn't know so much about fainting. And it's like, nope, you can't mess with her metabolism that way. So she just has to outwork people. Remember, the thing about Down syndrome and physical abilities is that low muscle tone, and I think it was somewhere in there, you can't do certain moves because you're able to spread out more and it damages your joints. And I just said, okay, well, we're going to concentrate on what she's good at. And what she was good at, she started with the basics: squats, bench press, deadlifting. And I'll put the hashtag in there, but those were the three things that we did a lot of, plus the cardio. But you find out what they're good at and you let them go do it, because we called it the box. If you put people in a box, they're only going to grow to the levels of where you put them. And I told her, it's like, I expect you to be a US champion at some point, but you're going to have to put in the work. And her brother tells her, you got to put in the work. And her fans and all these people, they give her all the support that she did not get here. I cannot tell you the lack of friendship impacts her every day. So we put in a lot of time to make sure she feels like she's normal-ish, but then I tell her, don't worry, you're not, because we're a big sci-fi family. I say, think of that extra chromosome. It's like mutant, X-Men, things like that. Something that gives you confidence in what you are as a person. And we just keep building on it, because this is the long haul. Down syndrome is not going away anytime soon, so we might as well keep working the way we are. So I can't wait for May 7th. Let's see, any other questions or comments?
I think we got them all.
Okay. Let me do this. This in here. Putting this in here. Okay.
Oh, and I did miss a comment. I want to make sure I read it out.
Okay.
It's absolutely lovely, from Catherine. Dr. Daniels, Fiona is so lucky to have you as a father. I was lucky to have you as a professor. She is such an inspiration for so many. She has made so many gains. I can't wait to hear about May 7th.
Thank you. But it's just a matter of finding out what people are good at, whether you have a disability or don't have a disability, and let people go do what they need to be successful. It's never going to be easy with any particular child. It's like sometimes I'm going, boy, and you don't have a disability. Oh, what's going on? That's children growing up, and I figure the oldest we have is 39, the youngest is 6, so I'm going to be doing this a while. So and everybody understands we support her by making sure that we're consistent with her. Because I don't know, if you had to go mental age, it's about maybe 11, and she's 18 now. And if you're looking at accommodations and reading level, those are the things that will come along. But right now, we're not there. But we're not saying that she can't. We're just not there yet. All right. I'm not sure where we are because my computer doesn't show me time. Where are we for time?
We have about 5 minutes left. So
okay.
Would you like me to advance forward or?
Oh, yep. I think we're pretty much towards the end of it.
Okay.
This one, the last slide, is that this consortium, they talk about all the things for speech and language, which is really important. But these are the people that are over in charge that I'm trying to contact regarding, let's talk about the things that she's doing because we control this particular thing as far as physical. And we're seeing if there's certain things that she's going to kind of gain on certain academics as well. So one of the things that we're trying to work with is these particular universities to say, somewhere, let's start doing some research. Somewhere, let's start talking about if we're applying this measure here, is that replicable? Because if you want to have a quality life, somewhere in there, we shouldn't be, that's my opinion, losing people because we just, oh, well, that's just what they do, or low expectations. So we have an idea of where we would like to take it. It's just that I have to be patient enough because I really enjoy doing the things with her. And it's like, she keeps me pretty sore most of the time because I do the same things. But yeah, I'm pretty proud of her. But right. As for everybody, thank you for being here. And it wasn't going to be an academic. It's just more telling her story.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. We have a couple of other questions if you have 2 minutes more to spare. Sheila asked, what supports do you have as parents? Parent groups, other fellow parents?
we have a few friends regarding, let me just vent, but it's parent groups. We were in a definite direct opposite of where they were going. And that's the military side of me, because they're like, well, just love them. I'm like, that's not going to give them a future. Just love them as part of it, but you still need to provide them a future. They need to be able to earn something and say, I did this. And when she looks back on everything that we post on Instagram, she goes, I did this. Start from where you were and look at where you are. And she gets it. But it's always work in progress. But supports, not so much.
And then I think we have one final question from Gina. I struggle with the consistency aspect. My daughter is 11. She has Down syndrome and autism. Any suggestions on staying consistent?
Oh, it's like most other things. Kids will push your buttons if they can. Because even though they have a disability, it's like, well, the first thing we're going to do is set your bedtime. It's like, wow, everything is turned off. Now, you don't have to go to sleep, but everything is off and you can lay there in bed. After a while, I make them a deal. If you can close your eyes for 20 minutes in a dark room and not do anything and you want to get up, you can get up. Still haven't had anybody make that yet. The things that working with kids with disabilities, it's like, find out what they're good at and say, here's your hook. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to give you ample opportunity to do what you're good at. But to get to what you're good at, we need to have you do this. And that's how we kind of always say, this for that. Sometimes it's an exchange, but as they get older, yeah, they just expect a teenager to be a teenager.
No getting around that.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. So appreciate you sharing you and Fiona's story. It's been wonderful. And thank you everyone for attending and for your comments and questions. This was recorded or is being recorded. So we will share this in the Center for Teaching and Learning in the next 24 hours. And again, thank you, Dr. Daniels, and everyone. Have a great rest of the day.